So you want to start your own fantasy hockey league, but you don't know where to start. I'm going to tell you everything you need to know before starting your own fantasy hockey league. The first thing you need to do when starting fantasy hockey league is choose which provider you want to use. Yahoo is the most standard provider, I would say. I would say most leagues use Yahoo. The UI is very nice. The customization is pretty much all you need as a beginner fantasy hockey player. You're not gonna find a stat that you really want to track for the most part that you can't track on Yahoo. So for the most part, I would say Yahoo is the default for someone who's just getting into fantasy hockey. ESPN is pretty much just a worse Yahoo. Something that Yahoo has that ESPN doesn't is rating, so you can get an idea of how you stack up against all Yahoo fantasy players by looking at what your rating is what tier you're in, things like that. So ESPN doesn't have that. There's pretty much nothing that ESPN has that Yahoo doesn't. But the UI is fairly nice. So I used to use ESPN and then I switched to Yahoo a few years ago. I have no regrets. The last one is Fantrax. So this is going to be for people who are a little bit more serious about fantasy hockey. If you're that serious, you probably aren't watching this. So this is for people who want to do dynasty leagues where you get to keep 20 of your players year to year, and you have like 30 teams in your league. So and then the other part of the customization that Fantrax does better is certain stats. So you can track things like takeaways or goalie goals or goalie assists. Those things can count, whereas they don't really count on Yahoo. So if you are looking for a more customizable experience, I'd recommend Fantrax. If you are someone who's just beginning and just needs something very basic, Yahoo is probably the easiest and nicest way to go for you. The next thing you need to consider is the number of teams that you're going to have in your league. So this is going to be mostly dependent on how many friends you can convince to be in your league, unless you want to do a league with strangers. And more, how competitive do you want your league to be, or how casual do you want it to be? The fewer the teams, the more superstars every team is going to have, or the more really good players. So I would say if you want something more casual, go with fewer teams. If you want something more competitive, where you're really going to have to watch free agency and the waiver wire, then I would recommend more teams. I've been in a league with 4 teams, 14-team leagues, 8, 10, 6, pretty much everything. For me, the sweet spot is around 8 to 10 teams. I find that to be fairly casual, but also a little bit of a challenge. So, but I'm in a 4-team league right now, and I'm really enjoying it. It's extremely casual and just a lot of fun having a bunch of superstars on your team. So if you're just trying to have a good time, I'd keep the no more than 10 teams in your league is probably where I would go. The next thing you're going to have to decide is what you want your roster breakdown to look like. So this is an example roster breakdown where this is for my 4-team league right now, where we have 2 centers, 2 left wing, 2 right wing, 5 defensemen, 2 util, so that's anybody who's not a goalie, then 2 goalies, 3 IR plus, and 4 on the bench. So obviously the bench is nice because it gives you some flexibility on who you can start on really heavy nights. The IR plus spots are crucial. People are going to have a lot of injuries at a certain point. Like some team is going to have a lot of injuries, so making sure that they have the ability to put players on IR plus and pick up replacement players is very important, as it allows you to not be as frustrated. And then this is actually the same roster breakdown that I had for my 8-team league, and we just added a defenseman when we went from 10 teams down to 8. So we used to have only 4 defensemen. This is pretty much, if you have 4 defensemen here, that's pretty much the standard for Yahoo. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think the last thing you would probably need to determine in terms of roster is whether you're going to do daily or weekly lineup locks. I prefer daily just because it allows you to start players on every night. you're not going to have anybody just benched a whole week, which is really frustrating. So I would definitely recommend doing daily lineup blocks. And even for the inactive managers, you just click start active players for the whole week at the beginning of the week, and it sets your lineup the whole week. So they don't have to worry too much that it's daily, because Yahoo pretty much just does it for you if you want. You then need to determine the scoring for your league. So there are two decisions that you're going to have to make here. The first one is between head-to-head and rotisserie, commonly referred to as roto. Head-to-head is where you match up against another team in your league every week and you try to outperform them. Whereas rotisserie is who outperformed all the other teams throughout the whole season. It's sort of like a free-for-all. And it's a season-long thing, whereas head-to-head is week by week, you are trying to beat somebody. You then have to choose between categories or cats or a points league. So points, you choose categories, but you give them values that you want to. So I'll give you an example. Goals can be worth 3 and assists can be worth 2. So let's say you and I faced off in a head-to-head points league, and I had 1 goal, you had 1 assist. That was it all week. Then I would get 3 points, you would get 2 points, so I would beat you in a score of 3-2. Pretty straightforward. Cats, it's determined based off of, if it's head-to-head, it's who won more categories, who had, let's say I had more goals, more assists, and then you had more goalie wins. Those are our 3 categories. I would win 2 of the categories, you won 1 of the categories, so I would win the matchup 2-1. Rotisserie, you're trying to lead in as many cats as possible by the end of the year, or you're trying to lead in points if it's a points league. For me, I prefer head-to-head. It allows for some more banter. It allows for more upsets. So if you like the best team winning by the end of the season, then rotisserie is definitely the way to go. I would say that is so much more fair to the team who outperforms everybody throughout the whole year and then has a bad week at the end. Well, they still won. Whereas head-to-head, if you have a bad week at the end, you're going to lose no matter how well you did throughout the rest of the season. So head-to-head, if you want to have a lot of fun and match up against people. Rotisserie, if you want the best team to win. For the points versus cats debate, I would say points is more beginner friendly because it's very easy to see how tangible, how much is a goal worth to you, versus in categories leagues, it's not super clear how much a goal is worth versus how much a hit is worth to beginner players. The next thing you need to determine is when you're going to end your season. So I think this is pretty much similar to the head-to-head versus rotisserie debate. There are 2 points that you can end the season, either a week or 2 before the end of the regular season or at the very end of the regular season. For me, if I'm in a head-to-head league, NHL teams are going to be resting a lot of their players down the stretch. You're going to have a superstar like David Pastrnak. He's not going to be playing games in that last week of the season, and you're going to be pretty upset about that. You're going to lose your head-to-head matchup because you didn't get anything from him that one last week of the season. So that can be pretty frustrating. So I'd say in head-to-head leagues, you should end early. Whereas with a rotisserie league, you're drafting players for a whole season. That's your idea in mind. So you should realistically get the whole season's worth of a player. So in a rotisserie league, I would definitely end the season as the NHL regular season ends. So I think it really depends on if you're in a rotisserie league versus a head-to-head league for when you want to end your season. The next thing you need to decide is what type of draft are you going to have? So there are 2 types of drafts that are mainly used. First one is a snake draft. It's fairly straightforward. Let's say you have 10 teams. You number everybody from 1 to 10. Yahoo will do this for you. The first person picks first in the first round. The 10th person picks last in the first round. But then starting in the second round, the 10th person will now pick first. And then the first person will now pick last. So this kind of balances, you got the first pick the first round, so now you're going to go last in the second round. So you don't get, the average player that you get per round is not going to be dependent on where you placed. Everybody's going to get roughly an equal value overall from the whole draft. The problem is you have players like McDavid who are just so much better than everybody else that it's a very clear number one pick, and I don't think that the snake draft quite makes up for the value that you get at first overall. The auction draft is where you nominate players and everybody gets to bid on that player until nobody wants to bid anymore, and whoever had the highest bid wins that player. I'll probably have another video based off of which one I prefer versus auction or snake. My quick answer is auction allows everybody to have a chance at someone like a Connor McDavid, which is so much more fun than just having it be random. Okay, this person gets Connor McDavid. Everybody else just kind of has to settle for whoever drops to them at 6th or 7th, So in general, I think auction drafts allow everyone to kind of construct the team that they want to construct. Now, in terms of beginners, I would say snake drafts are probably going to be easier to navigate because you don't have to think about, how much is this player worth? You have a budget of $200, so at least by default on Yahoo. So you have to think, okay, is Connor McDavid worth $60? Is he worth $70? Like, how much is he worth? And I don't really know, how much I can spend on the rest of my players. Like, is that going to be enough to make a competitive team? There's just too much to think about. Snake draft, it's much easier. You just pick the best player. Well, there's also some strategies for snake drafts, but I'll probably have a whole video on strategies for drafting. So I would definitely recommend snake drafts for beginners, though. If you want to have a little bit more fun, but have it a little bit more complex, then I would go auction draft. The last thing you need to consider as a commissioner is how you want to deal with collusion. So typically, if there is collusion across a trade, then you want to veto that trade as the commissioner. Now, you can leave this up to either just yourself or you can leave it up to a vote to the league. And I believe there's a setting in Yahoo that allows you to do that. For me, personally, I like to just leave it up to the commissioner because I'm the commissioner, but I honestly think it is better to leave it up to the commissioner and just trust that the commissioner is an impartial judge of whether a trader is collusion or not. You do have to do some due diligence if you are a commissioner. The first thing you should do is check in with the two teams if you suspect that there is collusion. Let's say someone trades Connor McDavid for Ian Cole. It's like, okay, why would you ever trade Connor McDavid for Ian Cole? The truth is you wouldn't. So it's pretty obvious that there's collusion there. But first, you go to the two people that made the trade and ask them each, what made you want to do this trade? How did this trade make your team better? And if they can't give you a straight answer, then it's possible that is leading to collusion. Maybe there's just a new player. In general, I think bad trades are not collusion. So I wouldn't just veto anything that looks uneven or that has a clear winner or loser. But for something like, Connor McDavid for Ian Cole, that's just ruining the competitiveness of the league, the integrity of the league, and that's something that you'd obviously have to veto. But I've also seen something implemented where you allow teams to be able to make counter offers. So you could be like, hey, if you really want a defenseman that badly, I'll trade you Cale Makar for Connor McDavid. Maybe they're stacked at center, and that's why they traded away Connor McDavid. And in that case, I think you're going to get, if someone doesn't accept Cale Makar for Connor McDavid, but they accepted Ian Cole, then there's something wrong there. So, but for the most part, I think it's a good solution to these bad trades that people make, these unfair trades versus the collusion trades. So you can it also gives you a little bit of information on whether or not you actually think that something was collusion or not. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this type of content and want to have more things like fantasy hockey updates or strategies, please like and subscribe. See you guys next time.